What's up everybody, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at a suggestion made by Avi in my Discord. If you want me to create some items, make sure to join the Discord and drop in suggestions, and then when I get some free time I'll be creating them for my channel and then dropping on the store if you do want it. So this is just going to be a run through of creating it in CLO3D. It will be available on my site, textured and everything as a markup in Blender if you want to purchase it. It'll be available for $3. So if you don't want to go through the process of recreating this, you can just buy it off my store. But yeah, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to be doing is importing an avatar. I'm just going to use the CLO3D avatars so that everybody can follow along. And then we're going to delete the accessories, which is going to be the hair. And then just for a little cheat code that sometimes I use, I'm going to be using one of the garments that are already available. Just your basic t-shirt piece. I'm going to import that in. And then as you can see, everything's already pre-made for us, and then we can just render it and then we're good to go. So that's going to be our base model from there. Okay, so we're going to just delete some of the points that are not needed, as we're going to customize it ourselves. So let's delete these points on the sides of both the back and the front, and then we're going to delete the collar section because we're going to be recreating one. And then for the front, because we have a button section, we're going to click on the center here and cut it. We're not going to cut and sew because it's obviously two separate pieces of fabric. So just like that, we have our section piece and we have an empty collar which we're going to be recreating. Because obviously we have a tighter collar, we're going to bring it up on the front. So let's just bring this up and then adjust this like that. So once we've adjusted that, we're going to just create a perpendicular corner. So let's right click and say perpendicular pattern corner and set it to 5mm and hit bam. Okay, so we have our perpendicular point there, which is good. From there, we're going to create an offset line. So let's right click on our external line and say offset pattern outline and set this to about 30. And then we can just go ahead and adjust this so there's some space. I'm just going to bring these out a bit so we have more room to play with. And also, if you're wondering why this is transparent, it's because I have transparent surface enabled. Normally you just have front texture surface. We're then going to create these internal lines. So let's just use our internal polygon tool and bring this down. And you'll see it will be set to both because it's symmetric. And then we can just sew these two together. And then we're going to set sublayer for now so that everything's just attached. You'll notice that the one side isn't loose, but we'll adjust that at the end. We just don't want to remove linked editing now, or else it will be hard to adjust both sides equally. Next thing we're going to do is work on the collar. So let's create a rectangle using the rectangle tool. We're going to create an internal line of 30mm. And then we're going to create some points, which is going to be the length of our front of the collar and then the back of the collar. We're going to right click and say split and make our line 116.3 and hit OK. And then for our next line, we can right click and say split. We're going to make this 131.6 and then okay. We can then right click and say split it in half. We're now going to use the internal polygon tool to create a 0.5 centimeter line at the bottom of the split point. And then we're going to create another split line of 2 centimeters on the outside of that. And then we're going to raise this using the polygon tool again by 5mm or 0.5 centimeter. We can then connect these lines using the internal polygon tool. Delete this internal line here and then convert this to a curve point. And using the curvature tool, we can just make this a little bit more curvy. Using the split tool again, we're going to just add 30mm here. Then we're going to copy and paste this internal line and make sure it sits on that 3 centimeters. And then using the internal polygon tool, we're just going to create a line here and right click and say edit trim to internal line. Then we're going to click on this line and say extend trim and add point to internal line. Then we're going to click on these 2 points, right click and say merge to point. And then we're going to use edit curvature just to extend this out a bit. And then from here, we can click on this internal line again and right click and say extend trim to pattern outline. Then we're going to create some more split points. So let's click on this line. We're going to create 2 centimeter split point first, and then followed by a 5 centimeter split point. Then we can use our internal polygon tool again to extend this out and down. And then we're going to, on the 5mm, we're going to extend it out and up. Then we're going to convert this to a curvature and use our edit curvature tool to make this a little bit rounder and same as the top. We can then right click on this line on the side and extend, trim and add points to internal line. Then using the trace tool, we're going to select all these lines, right click and say trace as pattern. And then we're going to do the same for the bottom piece. And this is going to be our collar. We can then delete all these internal lines, and my edge of the collar is around 10 centimeters. So I'm just going to extend this up a little bit, make it a bit longer. And then I'm going to add an internal polygon line from these 2 points. Then we're going to go to the edge here and right click and say unfold symmetric editing. So now we have our collar. We can then delete this other pattern that we created. Then we're going to go up to avatar display and make sure that arrangement points have been selected. Then we're going to click on our inner collar piece and just attach it around the neck, and then do the same for the outer piece. We're now going to sew them onto each other. So using our segment sewing tool, we're just going to connect these to each other. You can either use the 3D window or the 2D window. Okay, then select our collar and set our particle distance to about 5 and simulate. And now we have our collar. We can then select our collar and right click and say strengthen. This will just stiffen it out for us. And then we can unstrengthen the top piece. And then using our fold arrangement tool, we're just going to fold this down and hit simulate. And then once we're happy with how it looks, we can strengthen it. Looking back at our reference, the collar is much shorter, so we can just adjust this by clicking on this point and bringing it down and simulating it again. You can also extend the back piece out a bit, like so, and edit curvature so it's more aligned. And then we can unstrengthen this as well. Let's right click and flip normals so that we have our collar. And then let's carry on just tweaking this until we're happy with how it looks and how it's sitting. Perfect. I'm pretty happy with that. So the next thing we do is just our detail, extend the sleeves and then add some pockets and buttons on. So to do this, we're going to extend the sleeves. So let's extend them down and put simulate. Go to our front view. Just going to carry on extending it until I'm happy with the length. We're now going to create the fold of the sleeve. So let's right click and say offset as internal line. Set this to about 75. Obviously, it depends how big you want the fold to be. I'm going to go with 75 for now. We can then use the fold tool, fold arrangement tool to fold this back. Once we've done that, we're going to create an internal line. Number of offsets is 1. And then we're going to set this to about 20. And we're going to do the same for the bottom. And then we can sew these two together and hit simulate. So now that we have our folded edge, pretty happy with how that looks. We can actually cut and sew this internal line here just so that we can flip this and the normals are in the right place. Okay, from here, we're going to be creating the detail on the shoulder. So let's create an internal line of 90 and simulate. We're going to use our internal rectangle tool just to create a basic shape at first so we can get everything aligned. Let's bring that up and closer towards the center. And then we're going to bring this bottom piece up and we're going to add a point in the middle and just bring this down like so. Yeah, we can cut and sew this and just bring these pockets out. And then I'm going to copy and paste this just so we have the same angles and bring this down. This is going to be the pocket of our piece. We're going to use the sewing segment tool to sew it on. And then in our 3D viewport area, we're just going to look for that, right click and say superimpose over, and just like that. You can then copy and paste this over and do the same thing for our other pockets. Right click, superimpose over. Great, that's looking awesome. Then what I like to do for buttons is create internal lines to sew them together because I feel like the button mechanic doesn't work too well in CLO3D. Hopefully they'll fix that in the future. So let's create some internal lines quickly for the buttons. I'm going to make it about 1 centimeter in length and then just bring this up here so we can align it. Copy and paste that internal line across, and then we're just going to sew these together like so. and repeat the process for our other pockets. The next thing we're going to do is create our detailing in the stitching. I know that we still have our symmetric patterns on, which is why I'm doing this before I do the buttons, which is why I'm doing this before we separate the two pieces, because right now they're sewn together. So to do this, we're going to create a bunch of internal lines, which is basically going to be the path that we put our top stitching on. So there is quite a lot of top stitching that you can see throughout the piece. So the first thing that we are going to do is the pockets. So let's create an internal line around the pocket area. We're going to select all these lines, right click, internal line of 4 millimeters, and you'll see the detail pops up there. And then let's repeat that for this as well. And then we can just delete this line that's crossing here because we don't need that. And then we're going to, just repeat this process pretty much everywhere where you see that you need some top stitching. I'm just going to speed this up. I'm not going to take you through the whole process, but pretty much, just create internal lines almost everywhere that you want detail to be seen. Okay, once that's done, we're then going to remove our linked editing. So let's right click and say remove linked editing. And we're going to get rid of these pieces that are sewn together here, just so we can have some fabric moving so it's a little bit looser. Okay, we're now going to create some internal lines to do some sewing. So let's make an internal line roughly where we want the buttons to start. So I'd say here looks good. We can then click on this, say offset internal line, and reverse the direction. Make sure extended isn't clicked and hit OK. So I'm just going to get rid of one of these because I have 6 buttons on my reference. And then we're just going to do the same thing for the other side so that everything matches up. So we can select these internal lines and copy and paste them over like so. Then we're going to sew these together. So I'm just going to create roughly about maybe 0.5 centimeter and just connect these. These are going to be where our buttons are going to be, which we'll place now and hit simulate. Cool. So we've got our fake buttons connected, and now we can start adding our buttons. So let's use the button tool. I'm going to change my default button to just like maybe a plain one or 2. Yeah, that looks good. And then just going to place it right in the middle. Yeah. Let's adjust the width to 10 millimeters. Then we can just place these buttons all the way down the line. And then we're going to do the same for our pockets. Okay, let's now do our top stitching. We're going to use the segment top stitching tool to do our top stitching. Now let's go to our default top stitching settings and let's make sure that our offset is set to 1/32. And then we can go ahead and start placing our textures. Now to see your textures better, you might want to go to your fabric settings and then just adjust this. And then we can go back to our top stitching and start applying this. You'll see that it will come through like this. I'm going to make mine a little bit thicker. So we're going to go back to our top stitching settings. We're going to go to our thread thickness and set it to about 80. And then we're going to start applying this throughout the garment. So just place it on all those internal lines that you created, and then if you want to remove one, you can just use your top stitching editor and just click on it and press delete. I'm just going to speed through this quickly so I don't waste your time. Cool. And last but not least, we're going to just change our particle distance of our entire garment. Now remember, we changed the collar to around 5, so the rest of the piece we can set it to about 8 and hit simulate, and it should look a lot more realistic. So from here, we're going to set up our UV editor. To do that, we're going to go to our UV editor tab and right click and say reset UV to 2D arrangement. This will match what we were doing in our simulation and editor panel. And I'm just going to place this throughout and then scale it down and place it into our tab. And then let's go back to our simulation tab and I'm going to cut and sew this little top section actually, just so the folds come out a little bit better. You'll see that they're a lot stronger. And then when we go to our thickness, everything should be good. And then what I like to do is obviously exclude the avatar and set it to thick. And I try and make my UV coordinates pretty high as possible. And hit OK. And then for exporting, we're going to go File, Export, OBJ. You can look for your export folder. So mine's just on my desktop. I'm going to call this Casual T-shirt. That comes to the end of my CLO3D process of creating this T-shirt. If you want to stick around for the next video, I'm going to be texturizing it in Blender using VMod materials and then rendering it out. Make sure to drop a sub if you do want to check that out and turn those notification bells on. Like always, guys, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.